Okay, so welcome to our third block presentation of TedX DHS. Just to be on the safe side, we decided to introduce what TED stands for during each of the blocks, and to kind of give you a little bit of a brief background. So those of you who've been here during blocks 1 and 2 have probably heard this already, so I apologize for the repetition. So TED itself stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And in this block, you'll be hearing various presentations that deal with photography, linguistics, and technology. And so all of our presenters have spent copious amounts of time preparing for this, so we would ask that you refrain from any types of questions or comments throughout the process. Thank you. Okay, our first presenter for block 3 is going to be talking about photography and the dynamics of capturing a perfect image, or as close to a perfect image as possible. Dan Mayu is currently a junior here at Dartmouth High School. Among his hobbies, photography has always been the most prevalent in his life, and that is why he has chosen this as the focus of his TED. From a young age, he has been captivated by the visual aspects of photography and the world itself. Photography has given him an outlet to share what he sees with others and to offer them, an insight into his process of viewing it. It is his belief that photos are capable of conveying something that is more than just what lies within the frame. They have the ability to portray emotion, influence thoughts, and incite action. Because behind every photo, there's a story. And Dan really would like to share many of the stories that he has found in some of the historical photos that he has chosen to share with you. Please welcome Dan.
Grammar, vocabulary, syntax, phenoms are to language, as color, space, line, direction are to photography. Now, what does this mean? This means that both language and photography have composition. Now, by definition, composition is the nature of something's ingredients or constituents, the way in which a whole or a mixture is made up. Now, today I'd like to talk about a few aspects of composition in photography, such as color. There are two main types of color, primary and secondary colors, you all know this, and they are your red, blue, yellow is your primary, secondary as green, orange, and purple. Now, generally in photography, a photographer will focus on a dominant color rather than a subordinate color or secondary color in order to engage the viewer. Now, another important aspect of color is that color evokes emotion. Now, just take a minute and look at all of these. We all know that red is passion and romance, or violence and anger. Now, an important thing about these colors is that the emotions that they evoke can both be positive and negative. Take this scene from Damien Chazelle's La La Land, for example. Now, in this scene, the two main characters are very much in a conversation of a romantic theme. And Damien Chazelle, the director, expertly cloaked the scene in a red ambiance to further emphasize the romance. Now, another aspect of color is complementary colors, or red to green, blue to orange, and yellow to purple. What's important about these is that it makes a photograph more engaging and grabs the attention of the viewer. Complementary colors are like antonyms, like big to small. Another example would be this bottle with the leaves. This picture wouldn't be nearly as important if the bottle were, say, green or yellow. Another aspect of photography that I'd like to talk about is the use of space. There are two types of space, positive and negative space. Your positive space is comprised of the subject or the area of interest in the photograph. Your negative space is your background or the area of non-interest. Now, I'd like all of you to take a look at this illusion. Now, if you are perceiving the faces, the black area is the positive space. If you are perceiving the vase, you are perceiving the white area as the positive space. This just goes to show you that both positive and negative spaces can grab your attention. And they're both equally important. The positive space isn't always the most important aspect of a photograph. The negative space can be just as important too. Think music without rests. It would just be a cacophony of sound. Or think J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter without Harry Potter, the subject. Wouldn't make any sense. Both are necessary to create the story that the artist, or be it a writer or photographer, is looking to create. The next aspect I'd like to look at is the rule of thirds. It's perhaps the most well-known and fundamental aspect of photography, but I'd like to talk about what exactly it is. The rule of thirds dictates that a photograph is divided into thirds, both horizontally and vertically, and it states that the most important elements of the photo will lie on the intersection of the two lines or the lines themselves. Take this photograph, for example. If we apply the rule of thirds, we get this. You can clearly see that the subject, the butterfly, and the flower are very clearly marked along one of the lines. What's important about this is that it creates direction. It allows your eye to travel somewhere from the subject into the negative space. Now, there's a common misconception among photographers that this would work, that if you break the rule of thirds, it's like a sin. But breaking the rule of thirds is okay so long as you have a compositional aspect in mind that you'd like to utilize, such as leading lines. Now, if you take a look at this photo, leading lines, again, provide direction in your photograph. If you take a look at the staircase, the curved staircase, that's a curved leading line leading up to the subject, the person in the middle, or the door frame. If you look along the edge, you can see a straight leading line. These all provide direction in your photograph. Just like every great work of literature has direction, so does every great photograph. A great photograph captures the eye, holds it, and then takes it somewhere else. The next part of my TED, I'd like to look at iconic photos in society and talk about the story behind them and talk about a little bit how photographs are able to convey so much more than what lies actually within their frame. This photo is dubbed Migrant Mother, and it was taken by Dorothy Lang. And the subject is Florence Thompson. Thompson is one of 1,000 migrant workers that was starving in California during the Depression era. Dorothy was sent to photograph these migrant workers, and this photograph was one of her best that was sent into San Francisco News, as well as the Resettlement Administration in Washington, D.C. After they saw these photographs, aid was sent within days. Roy Stryker, head of the Information Division of the Farm Security Administration during the Great Depression, said, the photo has achieved near mythical status, symbolizing, if not defining, an entire era in the United States history. Not only does this photograph represent the starvation during the Great Depression, but it also represents the strength of mothers and their bond with their children. In a later interview with CNN, Thompson's daughter, Catherine McIntosh, stated that, "We never had a lot, but she always made sure we had something. She didn't eat sometimes, but she made sure us children ate. That's one thing she did do." The next photograph I'd like to take a look at is dubbed Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. This depicts 11 immigrant laborers eating lunch 840 feet above the New York streets. Contrary to popular belief, this is not during construction of the Empire State Building. This is, in fact, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, which is now known as the Comcast Building. This photograph proves to be a symbol of the Depression era, depicting the contribution of immigrant labor, hard work, and poor conditions of the time, but most importantly, it represents the grit and determination of the American people who, despite living through one of the worst depressions in history, continued to think upwards and reach for the sky. The next photograph I'd like to look at is kind of graphic. It depicts a woman being beaten by her husband. This photograph, dubbed Behind Closed Doors, was photographed by Donna Ferrato, and it depicts Elizabeth Lindbergh, the woman in the picture. This shows the epidemic of domestic violence in the United States. Domestic violence was rather commonplace in the 1960s, and domestic violence wasn't something that people necessarily wanted to talk about. It wasn't like an accepted conversation. You didn't really talk about it. Now, one challenge that Donna Ferrato faced after taking the series of photos is that no one wanted to publish her photos because they believed that it wasn't right to publish something that, that depicted domestic violence, and no one had the right to intrude on the household like that. But Donna Ferrato then decided to go on her own and publish her own photographs. Living with the Enemy was published in 1991, and it was her book about the topic of domestic violence, depicting many more than just this photo. And this sparked a new wave of women's rights movements. 3 years later, Congress passed the Violence Against Women Act, and mainstream media began to acknowledge the domestic violence as an issue, eventually publishing many articles with Donna Ferrato's work. Behind Closed Doors does not simply depict a man beating his wife. It depicts something much more, the epidemic of domestic violence in the United States. And lastly, I'd like to take a look at this iconic photo, dubbed Afghan Girl. This was on the cover of National Geographic, and it was photographed by a photojournalist by the name of Steve McCurry. This depicts a young girl who was in a refugee camp in Pakistan. She was dubbed the Afghan Girl because no one knew her name for 11 years. It was later found out that her name is in fact Sharbat Gula, after McCurry was sent back in Pakistan to locate her after he took this photograph. Now, most don't know that she was in fact uprooted by the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, and she trekked for days on end through the snow and almost died trying to get to this Pakistani refugee camp. Now, this photograph does not only show a girl with piercing green eyes and a great contemporary work and everything, it became a symbol for the turmoil of war in Afghanistan. Now, lastly, I'd like just to conclude with a photograph is able to convey so much more than just what lies within its frame. They can speak volumes, set movements into motion, alter perspective, and induce emotion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Our next talk continues on with the art of language. So it's entitled Lost in Translation, and it focuses on words that are untranslatable. We continue with a pair of speakers, as we did in the previous Block 1 assembly. Cassidy Vicari and Emily Isaacs are both juniors here at Dartmouth High School. Cassidy is interested in the sciences and hopes to become involved in the medical field after college. Emily also enjoys the sciences and finds the beauty of the composition of language has fascinated her. Emily has found that her studies of the Spanish language here at Dartmouth High School are only the beginning, and she plans to continue with the study of language as well as learn other languages upon graduation. In speaking to Emily, Cassidy has also become intrigued by the composition of language and the meaning of words. Their TED Talk will focus on how languages are beautiful, but sometimes with translations, the meanings are changed. Please welcome Cassidy and Emily.
Have you ever had an experience that you couldn't describe? Something so beautiful, yet you can't seem to find the words to depict it? There are nearly 200,000 words in the English language, yet none of them seem to capture how you feel. Ever think to look to a different language?
There are many words in the English language. There are many words in some languages, but not in others. You may ask, how can this be? Words are commonly derived from other words. They are frequently a combination of two or more words, or they are borrowed from another language. To be recognized as a word in the Oxford English Dictionary, a word must have 5 years of solid evidence to be considered. Solid evidence refers to the word's ability to prove evident throughout a prolonged period of time and able to appear in a variety of different contexts. These words that exist in a language but not in any other are what linguists call untranslatable. And although many people show doubt in the word and the idea of untranslatable in general, there's strong cases that prove just how true it is and just how puzzling language can be. But in the realm of language, puzzling is beautiful.
When you first think of language, beautiful probably isn't the first word that comes to mind. However, it is easy to find beauty when you look at the meanings of words and the sounds that languages make. There are two types of words in the world. Some are universal and some are cultural. Most often, the cultural words are the ones that are most hard to translate. However, these are often the ones with the most beautiful meanings. Take, for example, the Danish word hyggelig. Hyggelig can best be described as something that must be experienced to be known. However, this doesn't fully capture what hyggelig really is. An example would be, think of a hot day where all you want is a cold drink and you finally get an ice cold lemonade. Or you have a really hard day at school and you just want to go home and lay in your bed and you finally get there and your cat's waiting for you. These feelings are things that can only be, you must know them to experience them. However, there's not one word that describes that in the English language or most of the languages in the world. Hence, without these anecdotes, it cannot be translated, hence it's untranslatable.
What are untranslatable words? Like hyggelig, an untranslatable word is a word that has no equivalent single word in any other language, something that is unable to be fully captured in any other dialect without losing some of its meaning. It may be able to be expressed in a sentence or two or even a paragraph, but there is no one single word that can capture all that the word represents. Our world encompasses over 7,000 languages, and out of just 72 of those languages, 601 untranslatable words have already been found. The world is full of beauty through these indescribable words, and maybe one of those 601, or one that hasn't even been discovered yet, is the one you've been looking for. You would think it would be so easy to just take one word from one language and translate it to the next, but it doesn't always work that way. It is obvious that everyday things like foods and clothing and colors are easily translated from one to the next, but those things share something that is very key. Those objects are common and almost universal. It is easy to take the name of an object and find its equivalent name anywhere else in the world, because more often than not, the object you're trying to describe will be found there too. The words that are untranslatable, however, are the words that have a deeper meaning. These words are feelings and experiences and words that are the result of something that has happened to a culture's past. And it's hard to capture that same feeling when moving from language to language. When you move from a different language, the people changes, the experiences, the environment, and the past changes. And more often than not, this change is where the effect and the meaning of the word gets lost.
Many of these deeper words carry social connotations that are individualized to specific cultures. Since these words are so individualized, they are hard to translate to other languages. Take, for example, the Russian word toska. Toska, described by the novelist Vladimir Nabokov, can be described as a range of feelings. On its most morbid level, toska means unprovoked spiritual anguish, and on its most simple level, it means boredom. However, toska also refers to the Russian phrase communist nostalgia. Since places like the United States have never experienced a communist leadership, they cannot completely understand what communist nostalgia is. Therefore, toska, like many other words, is untranslatable in foreign languages. One of the most common untranslatable words is schadenfreude. This is a German word that means pleasure derived from somebody else's pain. It's kind of screwed up, but it is human nature. The off-Broadway musical Avenue Q has a whole song dedicated to the idea of schadenfreude. It provides examples that are relatable to everyday people. Some of these examples would be when you see a straight-A student get a B on their report card, or seeing a vegetarian being told that they just ate chicken. We know these feelings are kind of messed up, so we don't always vocalize them, but they are in our heads. Although you could just say taking pleasure in somebody else's pain, that doesn't really encompass what schadenfreude means, and it's not as fun to say. Another untranslatable word is the Arabic word ya berni, which can be translated into the phrase you bury me. However, ya berni refers to when someone loves someone so much that they want them to die before them because it would be so unbearable to live without them. The phrase you bury me doesn't seem to capture that. A more lighthearted, untranslatable word is the German word Drachenfutter. Drachenfutter is translated into dragon's food. However, it refers to the small gifts that one buys their royally upset significant other because they're mad. Although dragon's food doesn't really capture this, I do think it makes sense.
These incredible words could be very helpful to have in the English language. They are so specific to a particular certain time or feeling, they are unlike any word that we have in our language. However, it just can't be. And this is where the English language gets its name, the melting pot. To accommodate for the lack of these expressions, instead of trying to translate the untranslatable, words are simply borrowed. Words are borrowed when a language lacks its own native term to completely represent what the word signifies. These borrowed words are essentially called loan words. Loan words are words that the English language has accumulated over time from other languages to further enhance itself. English has gone through periods where large amounts of words were borrowed from particular languages. These time periods typically coincide with periods of a lot of interaction between an English-speaking area and an area of another dominant language. For example, long time ago with the large influx of Irish and German immigrants, or with a lot of interaction between French speakers and English speakers. English language speakers now use words from those languages and other languages in their daily lives. There are so many words that are used daily in the English language today that are actually borrowed words, and many people don't realize this. This is a very small list of loan words that English has accumulated over the years, and many of these words are words that I'm sure everyone has seen and used. For example, from the French, we've gotten words like art and fashion. From the Greek, we've gotten history and tragedy. From German, we have kindergarten and pretzel. And from the Arabic, there's algebra and mosque. Though loan words and untranslatable words seem very similar, which they are in a sense, untranslatable words are just the words that haven't been officially introduced into the English language or understood by English language speakers. These words are not only mysterious and perplexing, but they carry an immense amount of beauty wrapped up in the meaning and the culture they represent.
So whether you're looking for a word to describe a feeling or emotion or something you experienced, just know there's one out there that you may not be familiar with. It may not be in English, but there are 7,000 languages in the world, so there definitely is a word for how you're feeling. Since there are so many languages, it's important that you don't keep yourself limited to only knowing one or two and expose yourself to as many as possible. It may be impossible to learn all of the world's languages, but it doesn't hurt to learn a few phrases here and there. You may find something incredible. We hope this talk sparks the same interest in language that it did for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I think I want to go learn some new words. Okay, our next TED Talk actually talks about how the majority of you communicate, and that's with technology. So our next TED Talk is titled Narcissism at Your Fingertips, and it's going to be presented by Alexis Carvalho. Alexis Carvalho is a senior here at Dartmouth High School. In the fall, she plans to attend UMass Amherst and major in animal science, and hopes to become a veterinarian. She has decided to focus her TED Talk on the overuse of mobile phones and how they can and do cause limitations in face-to-face communication in everyday life. She chose this topic because she has noticed that this is a huge problem in today's society. People of all ages would often rather spend time scrolling through their social media instead of conversing with family members and friends. And Alexis hopes that her talk will encourage you to use verbal communication rather than technological communication. Please welcome Alexis.
So those of you who have a smartphone know how awesome they are. It's amazing that such a little device has so much power. They can replace the job of ATMs, MP3 players, different GPS systems, radios. Basically, you name it, your smartphone can do it. They also allow you to communicate with people all over the world. Whether it's a friend down the street, family in Portugal, or someone all the way in India, you can connect with them with just the push of a button. You see phones in your everyday life. Whether you're going to grab your cup of coffee, you're in the library studying, or you're out going for a walk. Even at sporting events, people rather capture the big moment on video rather than remembering it and telling it to other people. Oftentimes, when you see people on their phone, they're using social media. On the planet, 6 billion people have access to a smartphone. 2.2 billion of them are social media users. Social networking, social media, and Web 2.0 are all forms of user-contributed content and growth to the World Wide Web. Although it's great because people receive their information very easily through social media, it also causes people to promote a false version of themselves. It causes them to be more concerned with their followers rather than their friends, and it causes them to try to gain attention. Social media exaggerates conceitedness in many ways. It allows someone to post what they're doing when they're doing it. People also often post to promote themselves as a better version than what they really are. For example, a lot of times my friends will send me their Instagram pictures before they decide to post them online. They ask me what I think about the picture, what they should caption in the picture, just to make sure that people see a good version of themselves. It's kind of extreme, the lengths that people will go to for a sense of instant validation. And also, this self-promotion is also due to a fear of judgment or exclusion from society. This self-promotion is a major influence in the increase in narcissism. Of the 2.2 billion social media users, 1.87 billion of them are active Facebook users, 600 million of them are Instagram users, and 317 million of them are Twitter users. This large number allows different ideals to spread very easily. When people self-promote, it often causes other people to feel a sense of jealousy towards that person and a sense of disappointment in themselves. Studies have even shown that this is true. When an individual sees something good about someone else, the instant jealousy causes them to post about themselves, which kind of just feeds into that giant loop of narcissism. Due to this, social media has become a place to seek and repair damaged ego. It used to be a place to share pictures with family and friends, but now it's just a place of instant validation. In a study conducted by Western Illinois University, they took 294 students from the ages of 18 to 65. They took the Narcissistic Personality Inventory 16 and were tested for grandiose exhibitionism, exploitiveness, and entitlement. The one thing that all of these people had in common was that they were Facebook users. And it showed that the higher number of friends that they had on Facebook, the higher they scored on the test. The reason for this is because social media has become a place to prove normalcy. It's a platform to stress the fact that someone is more important than they actually are. It can also be said that young people tend to over-evaluate their importance. They emphasize minuscule opinions online and hope that they will have a major impact, when in reality, it will probably not have one at all. For example, this is one of my tweets. I was scrolling through Twitter, and people just kept on complaining about Trump, and I was getting very frustrated, so I decided to say something. I do not have a mass Twitter following, so I do not know why I thought this would have an impact, and as you can see, only 365 people saw the tweet. This not only proves how minuscule an impact someone can have, but it also provides that person with a numerical representation of their importance. Also, looking at the picture, you can tell that if I was not satisfied with how many people saw my tweet, I could just put in a credit card number, a security code, and an address, and thousands, maybe even millions of people would be able to see my tweet. This shows how most things are a numbers game to millennials. They always have a numerical representation of their worth. They can see who follows them, see who unfollows them, and they can even use third-party applications to try to gain more followers. College studies have even shown that students are 40% less empathetic than they were 30 years ago. They say without thinking of their consequences, whether they are getting in trouble or just becoming more vain. Despite the proposed argument, many people believe that social media did not cause the rise in narcissism. Many people like to believe that it is caused from childhood homes and schools. For example, most students at a young age are often praised for tasks that they have not yet mastered. This goes hand in hand with the idea that everyone is a winner in America. Johnny may have come in last place in the 50-yard dash, but he still gets the same trophy that everyone else gets. You could even coin our generation the participation trophy generation. Where naysayers are wrong is in their definition of self-esteem and narcissism. Self-esteem is an attitude built on accomplishments, values, and care shared with others, while narcissism is built on fear of failure or weakness. False compliments do not cause narcissism. They cause false self-esteem. The false compliments also do not cause confidence. They cause insecurity. This is the same insecurity that causes people to post online. Thanks to the internet, since the 1980s, narcissism has grown as fast as obesity. This is not an exaggeration, it is a proven fact. Both of these are major issues, and they both need to be dealt with, but only one of them is. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. And our last presentation for the Block 3 also deals with technology, but on a different type of topic. They're going to be talking about coding. So Guillaume Rathod and Kyla Roulette are seniors here at Dartmouth High School. Guillaume plans to major in computer engineering, while Kyla plans to study business and then move into the pre-med track with the hope of becoming an orthopedic surgeon. Their TED Talk will be on coding. Coding is thought to be the language of the future, and it is important that people have some sort of exposure to it from an early age. Already, students in elementary schools, including here in the Dartmouth Public Schools, are learning how to code with the hope of becoming technologically literate generation. They are doing this talk on coding because they want to raise awareness on its importance and how it could potentially be a viable future career for you and for others. Please welcome Guillaume and Kyler.
Welcome to your future with the language of tomorrow, today.
And of course, we're talking about coding. So what is coding? Well, coding is a set of instructions that computers can understand, similar to a recipe. They follow it step by step, line by line, and eventually create a product that us consumers use. Coding can be found all around us, from our kitchen appliances to our phones, laptops, cars. Everything technological has code. Coding consists of hundreds of different languages, from something very simple, like HTML, which we can learn in web page design, or some things that are more complex, like the language of Java, which you can learn in AP Computer Science. Similar to learning a foreign language, learning the language of code offers new doors for knowledge, opportunity, and communication that you would not have without learning the skill. Lately, education with coding has gained a lot of traction thanks to some powerful voices, such as Barack Obama or Mark Zuckerberg, who have pushed for all people to learn code. Another influential voice in the world of coding was Steve Jobs. He said, "Everybody in this country should learn to program a computer because it teaches you how to think." Now, coming from Steve Jobs is pretty important. Obviously, he had great success in the world of coding, and his influence is still felt today, as a lot of the code that he created is still found in your pocket.
So now that we know what coding is, what does it actually look like? What's its physical appearance? So when someone says the words computer programming, we might think of the hundreds of lines of code sitting on a computer screen. But I'm talking about the output. What is the output of coding? So if we think back 3 years ago, some of us might remember this game. We were all addicted, and I'm proud to say that my high score was 132.
Mine was 156.
Whatever. Anyways, I want to talk about the code behind this game, which took the developer, Dong Nguyen, less than a week to write. He used the language of Java to make the game, and if we think about it, it's really a simple game. Yet, he was an overnight sensation and ended up making over $50,000 every day while the app was on the App Store. For less than a week's worth of code, I'd say that's a pretty good deal. Besides games, social media networks also use code to connect us. Twitter, for example, uses Ruby on Rails to run its platform, so we can all keep those Twitter fingers typing away. Other social media networks like Facebook uses PHP, while Instagram uses Django. But perhaps the most common code we all come across is HTML, CSS, which is used to make every website that you've ever been on, shady or not. All of the websites you've been on or will go on use HTML. So if you're ever trying to make your own website, HTML is the language to learn.
So this is why we should learn coding in school. Coding is the language of the future, and by teaching kids to code now, they're better prepared for the jobs that lie ahead of them. Also, coding allows kids to learn valuable problem-solving skills. Through diligence and determination, they can go through roadblocks that present themselves during their projects and take an idea to a finished product that they're very proud of. Also, coding provides educational equality. In some schools that are poor, students are not exposed to the same technological benefits that kids in more wealthy schools learn about. So, by making coding mandatory at the elementary level, this ensures that all students are exposed to an equal level of the technological benefits while learning the valuable skill of coding. Lastly, Programming jobs in America are growing at an exponential rate, and we simply don't have the number of coders to meet these positions. But we can change this. By teaching coding across the board, we make sure that we're creating a generation that's better prepared to meet this demand for coding jobs in the coming years. So, where can you use coding? We take a look at this map, and the key over here shows that any country code in red is where you can use code. So after some deep analysis, we see that coding can be used all across the world, and the better question is, where can't you use coding? From the Alaskan tundra to the Sahara Desert, not only is coding possible, but it's extremely valuable in any society. Anyone who has the required skills and a computer, it's limitless what you can do.
So obviously coding is going to be in demand for the foreseeable future, but is it worth it? Well, it's about $48 an hour worth it. So on average, all Americans made $20.43 per hour for all jobs, while computer programmers made more than double that at $48.41 an hour. So if we take a look at this graph in terms of long-term money, a high school graduate, someone with a high school diploma, would expect to earn $580,000 over their lifetime. Now, if we look at someone with a college degree, whether it's bachelor's, master's, PhD, they'd expect to earn $1.19 million over their lifetime. Now, someone with a computer science major over their lifetime would expect to earn $1.67 million, 40% more than the college average. And the best part is, computer science majors go to school for only 4 years, or it can also be learned on the side as a minor. So on a yearly basis, programmers earned an average of $147,000. For comparison, the average American household income last year was $51,000. So this is almost 3 times the average household income. And it's not like there isn't any demand for programmers either. The average job growth for all jobs in America was 7% last year for the next 10 years. But for programmers was 30%. And that equates to 1.4 million people, which leaves plenty of spaces to fill in coding. We just need people to fill them. We just need people to follow the code.
So, let's tie this all together. If you want to maximize your job potential, it's extremely crucial that you learn code. Make it a point to learn the skill of the future. Whether it's in school, in the classes that we have, or at home, there are tons of resources that you can use to learn this skill. You just have to make use of them.
After you've learned the code, you need to apply that knowledge and write your own program. It could be something simple like Flappy Birds, your own website, or even a social network like Twitter. Google's Larry Page and Sergey Brin had to start somewhere for their website. Apple's Steve Jobs had to start somewhere for his Macintosh computer. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg had to start somewhere for his social network. Everyone has to start somewhere, but where will you start?
So, once you've acquired the skill and you've had some experience, you have tools to create some serious success. Now, this may not happen the first time, may not happen the second time, may not even happen the third time, but if you keep plugging along, eventually you will code your way to success. So, the demand is there, the reward is there, the opportunities are there. The question is, are you going to take it? Thank you.
Welcome. We would like you to be present for our 4th presentation of the day. Just a little bit before we start on TED Talks. If you don't know, it stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And these are presentations that are given throughout the country and the world on these topics. And they are done to enlighten your vision of things and promote some thought. We will be starting our Block 4 presentations. Our last talk presentations of the day will focus on we'll focus on different things here today, from language, politics, and music. The first TED Talk of Block 4 is on the literary style of magical realism. Nate Jones is a senior, will be studying computer science next year in college. In school, he excels at math, but also enjoys Spanish and history. In addition to his studies, Nathan is on the high school's football and baseball teams and is the captain of the DHS chess team. While reading 100 Years of Solitude by Garcia Marquez, he was inspired to learn more about the literary style of magical realism. In doing so, he was intrigued to learn about its connection to Latin America, culture, and history. Nathan's fascination with the topic has made him want to share it with you in his TED Talk. Please welcome Nathan.
Hi, so today I'm going to talk about the literary style or genre that is magical realism. It's also called marvelous realism or just the magical real. And I'm going to be talking about what is magical realism, how is it used in literature, and what is the importance, and why do authors actually use this kind of style. So in the middle, we have the generally accepted definition of magical realism, which is a realistic setting and place that's invaded by a supernatural or magical element that's taken as normal and real by both the characters and the readers. And it's just the overall blend where you have a very realistic idea of a place, but you also have an aspect where someone or something can do something that's unreal, not natural. And because it's literature, there's no like set formula. Every writer's unique, every piece is unique. So you have other conflicting definitions. And on the left, you have what happens when people try to be too technical with literature. And I'm not going to read that because it's a whole lot of long words that don't really mean a lot. And on the right, so magical realism is all about this blend between the real and the unreal. And because when it's perfected, it's supposed to be blurry, the border. You have people like on the right, like Louis Leal, where it's kind of blurry, the definition, because just like the style, it isn't a set thing. So you have like, if you can't explain it, then it's not magical realism. And that's just saying that it is an exact science. It is up to interpretation. Okay, so to help define it, we're going to talk about what isn't magical realism. And the idea of escapism, where you read something to escape from this world, such as comics, Marvel Universe. You don't watch a show or a movie like The Avengers to learn something about our society today. You watch something like The Avengers to get away from our society, for entertainment, to escape from this world. And same with Harry Potter. It's a separate world. It's fantasy. You're not really supposed to be learning anything. There's no commentary about our world. It's all escapism, which magical realism is not, which focuses on our world and gives a commentary, some human experience, something like that. And then realistic fiction is not magical realism just because there is nothing more than just our world inside of it. So some, again, characteristics of magical realism. You have a real world setting, and the picture on the left is a representation of the city from 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which is a very prominent work in magical realism. So that's the setting, and it's a drawing of a character in the setting, and it is a real world setting. It's represented after his town where the author lived, and it's completely real, it's believable. As you read it, the description, it is real. But then you have the magical element. The picture on the right is the magic man, Melchiades, as he's walking into the town. And he brings the magical element into the book, really. And he brings stuff like flying carpets and other stuff into the town. But the town accepts all of this without an explanation. Just like, say he brings in a telescope, they're like, that's a cool scientific development. He brings in a flying carpet, that's a cool scientific development. And there's no doubt of the reality of the supernatural, of the fantastical. And we'll get into the effects of that later, but the idea is just that the characters buy into that it's all real, that it's not fantasy where you have Harry Potter where this magic is explained, it's a different thing from the real world. This magic is part of the real world. It is part of everyday life. And so authors, when they write a book or a movie, they have sometimes they use wholly magical, they only use magical realism, in their book, such as in the lower picture we have Life of Pi, where the whole story is based off the idea that something fantastical can happen in the real world. And if you want to get the full effect from the story, you want to get the full takeaway, you have to buy into this idea that the magical is real. Or you have a book turned movie like The Green Mile, where they just want to emphasize an aspect that is real, and they want to show symbolically the purity and the innocence of a man by giving him healing powers. So he's already a nice guy, but they give him healing powers just to emphasize an aspect of him, so that when he's put on death row, it really reveals something about our society and about the cruelty of the world in itself. And it's just a really effective way, overall, magical realism is to get the message across. Because it emphasizes something, it shows something symbolically. It can create an exaggeration to show satire. And magical realism, a lot of its roots and popularity is based in Latin America. And in Latin America, in Spanish, it's called Lo Real Maravilloso, which is just the marvelous real. And it definitely grew in the 20th century, largely to authors like Gabriel Garcia Marquez with his huge book, 100 Years of Solitude. And the reason it's so ingrained into Latin America's society is because they have this idea of mysticismo, or mysticism, and it's based off like native people's myths, superstitions, beliefs, that the magical is real. They explain stuff through myths, so there is magic in everyday life. There is fantastical events that happen, and it's just the fact that it's present in everyday life makes it's easier for them to connect to the book and the idea that you can mix real and unreal. And again, it's also in South America, Latin America, Caribbean, they have this mix of indigenous people's superstitions, but they also have the Western ideals of like rationalism, scientific thought. They have the idea that this is the real world, you can explain stuff, but they also have these superstitions, so they can more easily buy into the idea that there is a real setting with some kind of unreal events going on. Okay. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this significance of magical realism, the whole point of magical realism is to show something, is to share something about the human experience. The authors use this because they want to share commentary on the world. And so they have this real world setting so they can easily connect and emphasize real world themes. But they have, and the setting is in the real world, because if it was some kind of fictional world, like if it was set on a different planet where people had superpowers because they lived on Krypton or something, it would take away from the idea that this connects to real world society. And so an example, in 100 Years of Solitude, there's a character called Colonel Aureliano Buendia. And when they describe his character and everything, you think this is a real guy, he can do real things. But then they describe his life, and he led 32 revolutions that all failed in his country, and he had 17 kids that were all killed, and he survived assassination attempts, he survived firing squads, and all these fantastical events, they're used, as we said on the other side, they emphasize and they exaggerate to show satire of real events that took place in Colombia, where the author lived, about the fighting in the 20th century between the liberal and the conservative, all these revolutions. And they have this real world setting so they can connect the two. They can connect the book and the unreal to the real world to show commentary. They give their opinion, and they can just send a clear theme with much greater impact than you could if it was realistic fiction, and also with more effective use than if it was a fantasy or science fiction book. And so it's just the key is that you have a real world setting, everything is real, but you just have that one thing that's magical that connects to real society and gives a commentary. And so if we connect magical realism to today's world, so magical realism is based off this idea that you have a combination of the real with the unexplainable. But in the book, that unexplainable doesn't need an explanation because it is part of our everyday life. And this is what makes it a little bit hard to understand. But when something crazy happens, people are just like, yes, that happened. But it also relies on the reader to buy into the fact that the extraordinary can happen in that setting, in that book, but also in real life. And so if we go through that, the magical reality of the story, people can also see the magic in the real world around us. So for example, in the book, the Magic Man, he brings stuff like a compass, he brings a telescope, But he also brings other stuff like a flying carpet, or he shows people how to levitate. And so all of this, it just shows like there is magic in everyday life. These superstitions, even though we like to think of all this like rationality and all that, if we just appreciate like the magic in everyday life, and we see the magic in everyday life, we can just appreciate stuff greater, and we can read these books and get more out of them and learn more about today's society. And that's just what I wanted to share with you today. Thank you.
Nice perspective on magical realism and what it can do to your imagination. Our next TED Talk is on the limited role of women in politics, which really coincides with today's celebration of National Women's Day. Women in Government, Bridging the Gap. Stacey Hartman is an 18-year-old senior at Dartmouth High School who has been involved in a number of activities. She loves to spend her time performing, whether that be at the a cappella group, the theater company, or outside community service of vocal troops. With that being said, her passion lies in politics. At Dartmouth High School, she has served as a key member of the student government in the roles of student council president and as the student representative to the school committee. Through interning for the mayor of Fall River in the U.S. Congressman William Keating, Stacey gained valuable hands-on political experience while at the same time realizing the lack of women in the political field, bringing her to our TED Talk topic today. This past election season, she worked with a nonprofit organization like Rock.
Today, March 8th, 2017, is International Women's Day. There we go. A day that celebrates the social, cultural, economic, and political achievements of women across the globe. But what we really need to focus on is, why was this day created in the first place? Why do we need a special day to celebrate half of the global population? Well, its true purpose, and the reason why it was brought about in the first place, is to call to action and acceleration for gender parity. Women have been working for centuries to achieve equality, and we have made many great strides, but there's still a prevalent level of inequality in the workplace, at home, in education, in the media, and yes, especially in politics, bringing me to my discussion today. Oh my gosh. I'm bad with the clicker. So the amendment guaranteeing women's rights to vote is nearly 100 years old now. But women have only recently become major players in presidential nomination fights. All of these decades of hard work have culminated in Hillary Clinton clinching the Democratic nomination for president. But we still haven't had a female reach the highest office in the United States. And the question here is why? This question is far from easy to answer, and if anyone in the audience had an answer to this, then I wouldn't be lecturing about this right now. But I find it really important to look back at our history so we can see how far we have come and how far we still have to go. We still have a giant hurdle that we need to overcome. Sorry. So, in the 1800s, women barely had any rights. We couldn't vote. They didn't have any divorce rights, and they couldn't own property. Basically, they were subservient to men in almost every way possible. It wasn't until the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848 where Elizabeth Cady Stanton created a declaration demanding equality for women and men. And that launched the women's rights movement, leading to enfranchisement for women. And then since then, we've made great strides. Even before we got the right to vote, Victoria Woodhull ran for president for the Equal Rights Party. We had Jeanette Rankin run and become the first female member of Congress in 1916. And finally, in 1981, Ronald Reagan appointed the first female Supreme Court justice with Sandra Day O'Connor. We've also seen great progress in this past election season, with 3 women female candidates who really gained a great following and a great number of voters, and that was Hillary Clinton, the Democratic candidate, Carly Fiorina, a Republican candidate, and a candidate from the Green Party, Jill Stein. And after seeing all this progress, we saw a woman come 42 electoral votes away from the presidency. So it is clear that we have made leaps and bounds of progress. But the United States and much of the world has still not reached what I call mirror representation. And this is a widespread belief that government should be reflective of the population that it serves. So to put it more into context, in the United States, 50.8% of our population is women. So technically, theoretically, the Congress should be 50.8% women as well, but it's far from that number. According to data collected from the Rutgers Center for American Women in Politics, only 19.1% of the current House of Representatives is women, and only 21% of the Senate is comprised of women, well below this 50% mark that we really hope to achieve. Now, this map points out the number of current US governors who are female. So the pink states are the female states. There's only 4 states with female governors, and then the District of Columbia as well has a female governor. Data also shows that out of the 100 largest cities in America, only 12 mayors are women. So it's really easy to see this disparity between women and men, especially in executive positions of power. So you may be thinking, how does the US stack up around the world? If we're so unequal, then is the rest of the world unequal as well? And the reality is, the world is at the same point that we are. So they basically have 22% of the world has females in parliament. And there's currently 18 out of the 196 countries around the globe have female heads of state, so president, prime minister. And this graph, the colored states are the ones who do have the female representatives. So you can see that there's really no association between development of a country and the number of women that are representing them, because the United States is one of the most developed nations in the world, and we still are very unequal. Okay. So this map just shows it a little bit more clearly. The lighter color green represents more equality in government for women, and the darker color green represents less equality. As you can see, countries in Northern Africa, South America, and like Asia have more equality than in the United States. This also shows it a little bit more clearly. You see that Rwanda is actually the top country for women's equality, and a major reason for this is they have a quota system which mandates that 30% of their government is women. South Africa, also on this list, has a mandate that says 50% of their government has to be women. So the only country that's not on this list is, the only country doesn't have a mandate is Iceland. They're number 10 out of the world. And the United States, we don't have any mandate, and we're actually number 80 in the world. So that shows you where we compare. So we want to know, why is this happening? If women do make up half of the global population, shouldn't these numbers be a lot higher? The National Democratic Institute classifies the barriers for women to enter politics in 3 ways. We have the individual level, the institutional level, and the socio-cultural level. Now, at the individual level, women who are in fact just as qualified or even more qualified to hold office than men don't think that they are, and they psych themselves out, so they end up not running. Also, a lot of women are mothers, and they don't want to take time away from their kids. So the individual level really says that there's less women in office because there's less women actually running. At the institutional level, political parties and legislatures are less welcoming to their female colleagues. So our type of voting system in the United States, which is based on political parties, does not allow women to become involved in government as much as other countries around the world. And then finally, we have what I think is the hardest barrier to overcome, the sociocultural barrier. The media will often act as a hurdle because news organizations will focus on a female's, like her sense of fashion, her home life, her marital status. But when they have a male candidate, they focus more on the policy issues. So that's unfair for women. And then there's this belief that women their sphere should be in the home and that they're the mother, they're the caretaker. So there's actually some people who believe that they wouldn't even vote for a female candidate if they were as qualified as the male candidate. This is shown in a poll from Gallup taken in 2015. 92% of people said they would vote for a well-qualified female presidential candidate if they were from their party. But the problem here is there's still that 8% of people that wouldn't vote for someone just because of their gender. And I bet this number would be even higher if every respondent was completely honest. Now, like I said before, the answer to this is not going to be easy. But the United Nations recently came up with 6 avenues to help achieve this political equality around the world. The first being creating equal opportunities for education. And the United States does a really good job of that because over half of people going to college are female. The second one is to create those types of quota systems that Rwanda has and South Africa has. Currently 100 countries around the world have this type of quota system, but I don't see that coming into play anytime soon in the United States because it's still a very radical idea in the Western world. The third way is to have policies in place that promote children's and women's rights. Another way is to have data that separates the data by gender, and to provide funding and to promote women's empowerment organizations and women's movements around the world. The United Nations also wants to create budgets that are very responsive to gender. I also believe that many more female role models that are running for president or running for vice president are going to encourage women around the world to become involved in politics. So when you see a Hillary Clinton almost clinch the presidency, more women will get involved in politics, and we've seen that in the past few months. Really, one of the best quote-unquote solutions would be time. NPR predicts that by 2080, we will achieve political parity. So that's a really long time away, but time is really what we need right now in the United States. Okay. So as a representative democracy, it really is disheartening that we still have not achieved political equality. A quarter of our government is women, but over half of our population is made up of women. And this is really important because women are known to be important players at all political levels. They often have a more prominent role in fighting for children's and women's rights. Studies show that women work more to advance social issues as a whole. And according to numerous data sets, women on average introduce more legislation because they're more willing to work across the aisle and work across political party lines. Recent protests like the Women's March and today's International Day Without Women show that there's still so much work to be done. But I'm hopeful that we will have a more equitable government in the future, and in the very near future, as more women become involved in politics and more women are encouraged to become involved. Now, I'll leave you today with a very remarkable and timeless quote by our first female Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. She said, "Development without democracy is improbable, and democracy without women is impossible." Thank you.
We hope today you celebrate National Women's Day, and hope in the future we continue to have more women in politics today and also more to come. Our next TED Talk is in how creativity should be encouraged and should be more encouraged in education. What kills curiosity? Tess Remick is a senior at DHS who plans to major in journalism at Smith College in the fall. She enjoys painting and writing. Growing up in a family of 2 artists and a musician, Tess has believed that being imaginative, curious, and creative are the most important parts of her education. Creativity is something valuable that should be celebrated and encouraged. However, in many in today's school systems, creativity is declining. Imagination is continuously less valued by schools and society in general. She believes the culprits to blame are the standardized testing in outdated classrooms. TESS supports real performance assessments, not filling in circles with those number 2 pencils. These tests lack in many important areas. They do not test our capacity for compassion, kindness, honesty, nor cooperation. She hopes to see a total education reform within my lifetime, one that encourages cooperation rather than competition. Please welcome Tess.
Okay. Okay, here we go, guys. The only qualification of being a TED speaker is to have an idea you think is worth sharing. I'm on this stage today because an idea I've carried with myself throughout these 4 years. Every education system on earth has the same hierarchy of subjects. First comes math and science, next English and the humanities, and lastly we have the arts. But why is that? When artists are just as important as engineers and mathematicians, our teachers are encouraged to follow routine algorithms rather than to excite that imagination and curiosity. TED itself celebrates imagination. Kids prosper best with a broad curriculum that celebrates all of their talents rather than just a few. Take me, for example. Math and science aren't my favorite. I love art and I love writing. But art classes don't count towards my GPA. Alarmingly, 44% of teenagers in high school feel as though they have no sense of self-worth at school. I feel that we are pushed to learn a lot of factual information when instead we just end up memorizing it as long as we can pass the test. Some may say that this is our own fault, but it's the education system that has made us value our grades more than we value our learning. Americans have a love affair with numbers. Infatuation with numbers only worsens our competition and doesn't promote our cooperation. Studies estimate that as many as 85% of high school students engage in some kind of academic dishonesty before they even graduate. Students are less likely to cheat in classrooms where teachers emphasize learning for the sake of learning. When the academic material is what is stressed more so than the grades, students are less likely to cheat. Teachers can decrease the amount of cheating by not stressing students out so much about grades. Of course, grades are important, but they shouldn't be the focus of discussion. Students shouldn't be told they have to learn something because there's a test about it on Friday. You should be told you have to learn something because of the value of that topic and how you can use it to enrich your own life. The public education system has arts at the bottom of subjects, and it fosters a feeling of non-intelligence in some students because they don't do exceptionally well in those core subjects. This view of intelligence focuses on the knowledge and the expertise of factual information, leaving those who don't have a knack in math or science feeling incapable or not even creative. One of my best friends got a perfect score on the math section of her SATs. There's no art section on the SATs. How will they see my talents? Is she more valuable than I am? Is she a better person than I am? The SAT doesn't measure our ability to communicate with one another, or our compassion, or honesty, or integrity. How can you tell a child that their talents aren't useful? Yes, math is important, but no more than art or dance. Is it a coincidence that pretty much all children enjoy getting messy, painting, and writing stories? Why don't we carry this natural capacity for creativity throughout adulthood? Pablo Picasso said that every child is born an artist. The problem is to remain an artist as we grow up. A growing number of schools, about 850 and counting, no longer require applicants to submit their test scores. College officials say that a test-optional policy helps them see strong applicants who may not have previously applied, such as students of color and students from low-income families. Data shows that the SAT is biased against students from low-income families. Poorer students tend to perform worse on the test. The difference might be the costly prep book courses and private tutors. When it comes to bias on the SAT, the the higher the score, the higher the income, the higher the score. It's an unacceptable trend from a test that boasts equality for all students. Standardized tests, in my view, are more tools than they are ends in themselves. They're often helpful as one piece of information in an application to determine if a student is ready to move on to college, but they shouldn't be the final decision. There is substantial evidence that these tests actually conceal more than they reveal. Don't let your SAT score be the basis of your self-esteem. The test writers say that the test measures reasoning ability, but all the test really measures is how well you can take the SAT. It doesn't reveal how smart a person you are. Intelligence is diverse. And when the requirement of submitting a test score deters some potentially strong students from even applying, it's time to take a fresh look at the tool. I'm not saying that tests are bad altogether. Of course they're not. I'm saying what tests have become is bad. It's a part of our curriculum to do well on testing. It doesn't have to be that way. Other countries are coming out with innovative solutions every day. Finland's education system encourages cooperation rather than competition. The thing about work in Finland is that they don't obsess about the disciplines we obsess in America. They have a very broad approach to education, which includes the humanities, physical education, and the arts. There's no standardized testing in Finland. There's a bit, but it's not what gets people up in the morning and what keeps them at their desks. I think it makes a huge difference to see a student, a child, as a whole being instead of just a number on a Scantron. The only way we can do this is to see our creative capacities for the richness they are. We cannot keep being educated out of creativity. I hope that people don't misunderstand this talk. It's not that school isn't important. It obviously is. However, creativity is not something you can learn in a regular classroom. Art is more about experience than it is about knowledge. That being said, knowledge is still very important. Each classroom holds 20 to 30 kids. Each of those kids has a past. Each of those kids has a preference, a dream, and a purpose. If you think that one person can stand up in front of those 20 to 30 kids and teach them the same thing in the same exact way, you're wrong. It's not the way to do it. Most parents, of course, think this is good as long as students maintain the high grades they're getting. But is it effective? Why do schools not prepare children for life? Why is there literally none to minimal focus on doing your taxes, home economics, cooking, agriculture, and world problems? I'm not suggesting that all schools are terrible or that the whole system is a mess. Of course it's not. Public education has benefited millions of people in so many ways, including myself. I wouldn't be up here today if it wasn't for the free public education I received in Massachusetts. Education has opened my mind to the world around me and gave me the foundation on which I've created my life. For countless others, education has been the route out of poverty or disadvantage. Numerous people have succeeded in the system and done well by it. It would be ridiculous to suggest otherwise. But far too many have not benefited as they should have from the long years of public education. The success of those who do well in the system comes at a high price for the many who end up not doing as well. We need to encourage all talents in children, and we need to tell them that their chorus class is just as important as their geometry class. And if we can encourage more people, that will be a movement. And if we keep the movement going, that will be a revolution. And I think that's exactly what we need here. Thank you, guys. My slides didn't work. No.
We're all different learners. Let's assess our learners in different ways. Our last TED Talk of the day will focus on the universal language, which according to Dominic is music. Dominic Vicari is a senior at DHS. His life is consumed by sports, academics, and most predominantly music. He plays bass in our school orchestra with wind ensemble and in the concert band. He's also a drum major in the marching band. One of the reasons he loves music so much is because it is accessible in many forms from pretty much anywhere in the world. This will be the focus of Dominic's TED Talk. He chose to participate in today's TED Talks because he wants to affirm the importance of music in our lives, since many people don't think about its daily impact. He is extremely interested in this topic, and he hopes that by the end of his talk, you will be just as intrigued. Please welcome Dominic.
So I bet you're all thinking right now, oh God, this kid's going to talk about classical music for 10 minutes. Maybe I'll get a quick nap before the final bell. Well, you're not wrong. I am going to talk about classical music. But not just classical music. Music of any genre has come to be a language that we all understand and appreciate, no matter what tongue we speak. There are approximately 7,000 languages spoken worldwide today, but only 10% of them have 100,000 or more speakers. This creates a communication gap. So the big question is, how do we bridge this communication gap? In everyday life, humans have a tough time understanding other humans when they don't speak the same language, as language barriers are existent in the workplace and in public and in other events. There are two things, however, that are universally understood by all humans: emotion and sound. We'll start with emotion. There are 6 emotions studies have shown that are detectable just based on the facial expressions of other humans. These emotions are happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust. There we go. These emotions are detectable simply based on the facial expressions, and I'm going to prove that to you right now. I'm going to show you 3 different people, and it's going to be your job to decipher what they are feeling. We have this little boy. Wow, you guys are jumping the gun. We have this woman. And this man. Now, without any of them saying anything, their emotions were screaming at you. And this is because humans can detect facial expressions from anywhere in the world. And in fact, all of these people speak French. I actually have no idea what language they speak. I just said that. This little boy is obviously very happy. This woman is very angry, and I would not want to be her son's significant other or even know her at all. And we have this man who's completely disgusted by his corn dog. Now, I understand that the corn dog is probably enough of a visual representation to tell that the man would be disgusted, but you get the point. In addition to emotions, sounds are universal as well. In a study done by University College London, participants from Britain and the Himba were read short stories based around a particular emotion. At the end, they were asked to associate certain sounds, like crying and laughter, to the stories based on the emotions that the stories gave off to them. The British people heard the sounds of the Himbans and vice versa. Both groups associated the same sounds with the same emotions, showing us that sounds is universal as well. So why is any of this important? I've proven to you that both emotion and sound are universal. The awesome thing is, music is simply a combination of the two. Music has 3 main components: pitch, rhythm, and tempo. Pitch is how high or how low a note is played. Rhythm is the pattern at which they are played. And tempo is the speed at which a song is played. Now, the awesome thing is, the 3 things that make up music also make up our speech. For example, we change the tone of our voice to change how we sound to others. And none of you are tone deaf, despite what your mother says in the car. If you were tone deaf, you would talk like this. No, we change the tone of our voice to change our emotions. An example, if I want to sound really sad and just devastated that I'm giving a public presentation right now, I might lower the tone of my voice a little, talk a little slower, use loose rhythms. But if I want to talk about how the Patriots defeated the Atlanta Falcons in the Super Bowl, sorry, Angela. Thank you. I'm glad this slide got more love than all my others. I'm going to talk in really high-pitched voice because I'm excited and I love Tom Brady so much, and you can see that everything is just getting amped up a little bit, and I'm changing the tone of my voice. Another example, I'm walking down downtown New Bedford, and I see 2 people just screaming at each other in Portuguese, and I don't speak Portuguese, so I have no idea what they're saying. But just based on the tone of the voice, I can tell that they're upset at each other. We change our sounds to change how we want people to listen to us, and music does the same thing. We'll start with pitch. Pitch is the note that is chosen by the composer or songwriter. Songs are usually built on sets of chords, which are individual notes stacked on top of each other to keep it simple. This is where I'm going to pull out my melodica. A major chord, which sounds like this. That wasn't that hard. A major chord sounds pretty happy and positive, and is usually associated with positive things, whereas a minor chord, which sounds like this, usually has a negative connotation. Now, none of you are geniuses on music theory, and neither am I, but we all get the same feelings based on these chords. And composers will use these chords to get different emotions. In addition to pitch, songwriters and composers will change the tempo of their piece. For example, a fast song in a major key can show something like excitement or anticipation to an event, or like a sporting game. Whereas a slow song in a major key can show you're relaxing by the beach and you're just chilling, drinking some lemonade, listening to all these major key slow songs. Slow songs in a minor key, however, like Hello by Adele, it just gives you this really terrible, sad feeling, and that's because of the combination of the slowness and the key, whereas a fast song in a minor key can show aggression and anger, like someone would be chasing you with a dagger, just as an example. We also have rhythm, which I believe is the most important component of music, because without rhythm, you don't have any notes. There's nothing there. Music is simply a combination of rhythms over and over again, repeating line after line. And all of you have some sort of rhythm in you. In elementary school, when your recess monitors clapped, you all responded, like some of you just did. Communicating through rhythm. And composers and songwriters use rhythm, tempo, and pitch to communicate their message to you. Now, besides listeners feeling emotion from music, music is a way for us to connect and really decipher how people are feeling. For example, 2 years ago, I'm in an orchestra, and the conductor says, "Everyone stop. We're gonna create a story based around this piece." And I know some people know exactly what I'm talking about right now. And 90% of the kids in the orchestra came up with the exact same story about these two people dancing at a ball, and the man leaves the woman he's dancing with because he spies another girl. Obviously, that's very sad. But the song was probably in a minor key, and it was probably pretty slow and picked up in intensity and excitement. But the point is that we understand the composer's message just through the music. There's no story that comes with the piece. Oh, this is what he's trying to write here. No. It's all based on how the composer gets the piece to sound. Another example of this, we've all taken foreign language class here. I did okay in foreign language class. I didn't always know what was going on. I remember one time we were learning about this song that the Spanish people sing in time of celebration, and I couldn't really understand the lyrics because I wasn't very good at Spanish, but I could tell what the song was used for, simply based on the sounds. It was probably in a major key. It was probably upbeat. It was probably happy. And these three things have combined to allow me to share the same emotions as the Spanish people did. And isn't that the real reason why we talk to someone? To have them to share our emotions with them. That's why I believe music is so important. For example, if I'm in China and I'm just yelling randomly in the street, "Somebody please help me," a lot of these Chinese people will probably have no idea what I'm saying because they don't speak English. But they'll know that something is wrong simply based on my emotions. And music allows us to share the emotions of people we don't necessarily have the other ways of communicating with. Music is also universal in another way. Music has a written notation that all musicians understand. Yes, it's the simple black notes that you see all the time. Obviously, some countries and regions have different characters and symbols, but black notes are black notes. And you can sit a musician from France and you can sit a musician from Brazil down in the same room together, plop a piece of music in front of them, and they'll be able to make music and communicate. Hold on. Okay. On the left, we have the South Korean national anthem. And on the right, we have my favorite song, our national anthem. The South Korean national anthem, the title, the composer, the lyrics, the arranger, everything's written in Korean. And on the right, our national anthem, everything's written in English. But what's same is the black notes. A G in South Korea is a G in America. And that's the amazing thing about music. Composers, which come from all of these countries and more, don't expect their musicians to speak the same language as they do. As I've played the pieces of many composers, and most of them probably don't speak English, but I'm still able to share their stories. Just because black notes are black notes, and they're the same everywhere in the world. And I think in today's world where there's a lot of brokenness between communities and regions, we need to find something to look forward to connect people, where words can fail, beliefs can fail, religions can fail. I think everyone has a certain appreciation for music, and certain songs make everyone feel the same way, no matter what they believe in. Thank you.
What a wonderful message with music. This concludes our TED Talks for this year. First of all, I'd like to thank the presenters for their wonderful job. So once again, give them a nice round of applause. I would also like to thank the crew that's been working at the front of the auditorium, Julia Levin in conducting the PowerPoints. For lighting and video, Mr. Rob Parati, Mr. Peter Chase of DCTV, Catherine Pacheco for lighting, the DHS TV media students. We've been working hard on this. Also, a special thanks to the DHS administration for allowing us to do this amazing and inspiring TED Talks. To Mr. Bill Kingsley in the music department, Ms. Meg Rogers and the theater arts students for allowing us to use the auditorium. Mrs. Judy Cronin, Sue Burnett, and the art club students for the design of stage sets. And also Ms. Angela English for helping us with the organization of the students. Once again, we hope, Ms. True and myself, we really are thankful that you were invited here today, and we hope you were inspired. And thank you again for participating in TED Talks 2017.